Significant military fighting in Libya should recede in the next few days, according to Defense Secretary Robert Gates. He also says the U.S. will hand over responsibility of maintaining the no-fly zone to allies. Jeremiah Patterson is in the studio with two experts to discuss the crisis in Libya and to analyze what it means for citizens there. Jeremiah?
Thanks, Catherine. President Obama calls for Gaddafi to step down, yet U.S. military involvement in the international mission leaves some politicians questioning the end goal. That's part of the issue we're looking at now. I'm here with Professor Yael Warshel, an expert in international and peace communication, and Professor Robert Pastor, co-director of the Center for Democracy and Election Management and professor of international relations. Professors, thank you for joining us. Now, part of the big debate right now is how the U.S. should move forward. So Obama has made it clear that he wants a Gaddafi regime to step down and out of power, and yet our military objective in itself is not as clear. Professor, could you speak to the distinction between those two and also how we balance those moving forward?
Well, the U.S. military forces right now are acting on behalf of a coalition established under a UN Security Council resolution whose principal objective is to prevent civilians from being harmed and therefore to protect, in effect, the rebels. But it's not for the purpose of regime change. So I think President Obama has made a very clear distinction that while U.S. policy would like to see a regime change, that doesn't necessarily reflect our military actions. Our military actions are in pursuit of the UN Security Council resolution.
Should the U.S. Adopt a game plan, a military game plan that does allow for a regime change in the future?
I think if it did so, it would fracture the UN Security Council coalition because there are some countries that would not be in favor of that. Many of the countries that abstain, such as Russia and China and Brazil, would be opposed if the objective were regime change. So as long as we want to retain the legitimacy of the United Nations as the basis of the operation, and I think that is very desirable, I think we need to have our military actions in pursuit of that. With regard to regime change, quite frankly, the principal instrument for that has to be the Libyans themselves and the rebels.
Sure.
Another thing to think about is, apart from intervening militarily, is that there needs to be an effort to reach out to the Libyan National Council in Benghazi, the provisional government, as well as to Libyans in Tripolitania who are purported to be in support of Gaddafi. There seems to be, on one hand, legitimate support, but on the other hand, it's not entirely clear. The situation right now, what's very difficult about it is that it's a media mess. Unlike most conflicts where there's always absolute confusion about what exactly is happening, there's obvious difficulties for reporters to work in conflict zones. This situation is particularly messy. So it's not 100% clear what different factions of Libyans want.
What makes this situation so much different than others that we've seen throughout North Africa in the last few weeks with respect to media?
There seems to be, I would say there's two campaigns here. There's both a military and psychological warfare campaign going on, one and the other together. I wouldn't be surprised, for example, if we find that journalists who have been operating there have been omitting information or have been forced to say different things. The sort of repression and fear that they're operating under right now is on the sort of more extreme end. So I wouldn't be surprised if we learn that some of the information that we think we know is actually inaccurate. And it's also not clear that journalists are able to get to all areas of the country to actually know exactly what's happening. So the issue then is, apart from the U.S. intervening militarily, is knowing, well, what do most Libyans want, right? So this is a problem that will need, it's apart from just participating by bombing or enforcing a no-fly zone from the air, there's going to be an effort to actually talk to Libyan people and try to figure out what it is that they want. And it's not entirely clear now.
Now, some people are saying that President Obama is missing a key political opportunity here to act on this crisis. Robert, part of your work as a co-director at the center, can you give us some analysis on that? Is he missing an opportunity here, especially with 2012 presidential election around the corner?
On the contrary, I think he is wise to put the United States in the back seat of an international operation which has the legitimacy of the UN, but frankly did not receive a congressional declaration of war. So I think what we've done is we've actually assumed both the leadership but encouraged our allies to take the real leadership on the ground. The easy part is the part that we've just seen in the last 3 days. You could send 130 Tomahawks off of our cruisers and our submarines and aim and destroy the basic anti-aircraft system. But the hard part is just starting. And the truth is the U.S. already has 2 wars. The American people are tired of those 2 wars. They are not at all enthusiastic about starting a third that could be settled reasonably shortly or could be prolonged for a long time, just as occurred in the last 2 wars. So I think from a political standpoint, I think he has adopted a wise decision of assume the back seat in this international operation as soon as the initial Tomahawk effort is completed.
Yeah, let's go back to the rebel groups for a moment. Part of your work focuses on peace communication. Is there a possibility that talks could be established between oppositional forces and the Gaddafi regime? And if so, would those be effective?
The work that I deal with in peace communication is really trying to target people from a grassroots level, and it's spending years and years of really trying to change people's behaviors. That's not something that's, we have time for now.
Sure.
But at a different level of sort of peacemaking or negotiating, I don't think that we're going to see anything happen right now given Gaddafi's response, right? He has a particular rhetoric and then his actions are quite different.
Right. So we'll be looking at that in the future. Professors, I want to thank you again for joining us. And we'll be following this issue closely in the coming days. Catherine, back to you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Coming up after the break, a major road in Maryland is finally open. It should save time, but at what cost? We'll have the details, so stay tuned.